Social inequality is an important theme for the Centre for Social Investigation. It is a large theme, and in this talk I'm going to look at just a tiny part of it. What I'm going to do is ask and try to answer the question, what does the evidence say about the impact of social class on the examination performance of children around the time they finish lower secondary school? In other words, at the end of Key Stage 4. I'm also going to allow myself a supplementary question and ask, has the degree of class disadvantage shown any sign of diminishing over time? The overall story since the turn of the millennium is of increasingly better examination performance. To keep things simple, let's define success at Key Stage 4 as gaining at least 5 GCSEs at grade C or above. The red line on this graph, this line here, gives an estimate from the labour force survey of the percentage of English 17 and 18-year-olds observed between 2001 and 2013 who achieve this level of performance. The percentages from the labour force survey have been plotted so that they correspond approximately to the year in which the people sampled would have sat their Key Stage 4 exams. By 2013, the labour force survey suggests that more than 70% achieved 5 or more GCSE passes. What do I mean by social class? Well, following common practice, I'm going to measure it by using occupation. Each 17 and 18-year-old in the labour force survey is allocated to a social class on the basis of their parents' occupation. This is not necessarily the occupation of the father, and the allocation of a class, actually in practice an Office for National Statistics so-called NSSEC category, is made according to a set of rules that takes into account the type of work done and whether a job is full-time or part-time. This slide shows the distribution of classes by survey year. As you can see, it actually doesn't change very much over time. About 10 to 12% come from the higher managerial and professional categories, and about 20% come from the bottom two categories, which are the routine employees and homes in which the parents are either unemployed or out of the labour market. Class inequality is frequently described in terms of relative risk. Now, this is a slightly peculiar term to use in the context of something like exam success, which is usually regarded as a good thing. So instead of using the conventional term, I'm going to call it the disparity ratio. The disparity ratio is simply the percentage from a particular class background gaining 5 or more GCSEs divided by a reference percentage. In this case, it's convenient to use as the reference percentage the percentage of the total 17 to 18-year-old age group that between 2001 and 2013 managed to achieve 5 GCSEs. That's around 65%. The disparity ratio should be interpreted as follows. A value of 1 means that children from the class under consideration achieved the reference level. That's represented on these two figures here by this horizontal grey dashed line. A disparity ratio of 1.4 would mean that children from the class under consideration exceeded the reference level by 40%. And a disparity ratio of 0.7 would mean that they fell short by 30%. As you can see from these two graphs, class disparities are relatively large. For example, in 2013, almost 90% of boys from the higher managerial and professional homes passed 5 GCSEs, but less than 50% did so from homes where the parents were in routine employment or indeed not in employment at all. Since 2001, there has in fact been a very slight decrease in class inequality. The overall spread of the trend lines is slightly narrower in 2013 than it was in 2001. So looking for example at the males here, you'll see that the spread of these points here is somewhat larger than the spread of the points here, and you would observe, in fact you do observe, a similar sort of thing for the females here. The decrease in inequality is mainly a matter of a slight catch-up by children from households headed by a routine worker or by a parent who is either unemployed or not economically active. In general, girls do better than boys, and we saw that on the previous slide. But is it true, as is sometimes said, that working class boys are particularly disadvantaged? Well, it turns out that there is something to that. This slide plots how the difference between the performance of males and females changes as we descend the class ladder. The difference between the genders at the top of the class structure is a matter of about 5 percentage points, and at the bottom of about 12 percentage points. We would find a similar pattern if instead of looking at differences between the genders within each class group, we examined the relevant disparity ratios. So, to sum everything up, between 2001 and 2013, class inequality at Key Stage 4 decreased slightly. However, the magnitude of the disparity between the top and the bottom of the class structure is still relatively large. And the magnitude of the gender gap does tend to get larger as you descend the class hierarchy.